It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
State Representative Charlotte Douglas is joining us from District 75, calling in this morning. Good morning, Charlotte. How are you this morning?
Good morning, Paul. Thank you for having me.
Yes, I'm glad that you could come on. I wanted to have you on. I wanted to talk a little bit about just kind of what's been going on, really specifically in this District 5 Senate race. Have you been following this District 5 Senate race between State Representative Bob Ballinger and Senator Brian King?
Yes, sir, I have, with just much sadness, actually, toward the process of how we elect people. And in particular, I have seen where candidates are using scorecards to, in my opinion, trick the public into believing that they are, the candidate of choice just because they get an A on a certain scorecard. And I just see a need for some kind of, almost like a clearinghouse for the scorecard itself. What kind of integrity does it have?
Yeah.
What kind of questions were asked? And this has been a problem in this district, in the Senate 5 race. I see it as a problem.
Yeah. So there was one election guide or whatever that was reportedly inserted into church bulletins this past Sunday. Did you hear about those reports?
I heard about it, and if it's the election guide that I have also seen, when you get on their website, those are the only two candidates that they chose to even score. So why would a statewide election guide just score one Senate race and not be, are they funded by one candidate? It just makes you question, where's the transparency? And when you look at the election guide, it's not truth about Bob Ballinger. He says he opposes Obamacare, but he only opposed it in 2013, and then he flipped his vote in 2015 and 2017. So,
yeah, I see
if
this.
This is in a church bulletin, you would hope that this would even at least be the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not.
Where
it's
it
not
says,
true about the Freedom of Information Act as well, and his support there.
Yeah, that is interesting. Authorizes private purchase of health insurance with Medicaid funds. It says that Bob Ballinger opposes that.
And if you look at the link, it's only to his 2013 vote.
Yeah, it's not. It's not the subsequent votes after that.
No.
Yeah, that is suspect.
And I think the public needs to know that Bob Ballinger stood strong for the Freedom of Information Act, and then, under pressure from the governor and from big business, he went in and watered that down under the cover of night, using all kinds of committee tricks to water that down and bring back a bill that big business and the governor, okayed. And then some of us that did not vote for that, of course, the public may not understand that we didn't want to vote for the watered-down version. So how do you reflect that in a voter's guide?
Yeah. Yeah, it's really hard to convey a lot of times the process of what actually happens down there with what the end result is. And, we see that with a lot of bills. A lot of times we have it's amazing. The Republican Party, the leaders of the Republican Party put true conservatives in awful positions. I mean, just really terrible positions. And it sure is a shame. And I just want to point out, there's on this particular election guide that was inserted into church bulletins, there's a lot of pro-life bills here, or supposed pro-life bills. And I just want to say both of these men, Bob Ballinger and Brian King, they both have the endorsement of Arkansas Right to Life. Both of them do. And so to try to put out a voter guide saying something different is just a little strange to me.
Well, and does your life work? Does your philosophy? Do your conversations? The way you conduct your life, does that not count? Because sometimes you're not in your seat for a vote. But people around me know how I stand on things. We know that Senator King stands for, the value of life. But just because he wasn't in his seat for a vote, maybe, then, or maybe if a bunch of bills were bundled in the Senate and he didn't like one of the 10 that was bundled and he didn't vote on that bundle.
Yep.
Public does not understand the process unless we educate them.
Mm-hmm.
And you're doing a great job of doing that. But
the
NRA is not have lost their integrity in the way that they send out their surveys, and they'll ding you off of one question that you answered wrong, but don't even recognize that you have stood strong, for 6, 12 years fighting for gun rights. And then, so the body of your work does not count.
Mm-hmm.
Americans for Prosperity is doing the same thing. They have lost their integrity in the state because they pick and choose people that they have grown to be friends with, and then they alter elections by backing one or the other. And it's not off of the body of our work. It's not off of what we stood strong for. It's off of who they have become friends with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're talking with State Representative Charlotte Douglas. That's not the first time I've heard that about Americans for Prosperity, how they've let their personal relationships now basically trump the principles that they claim to stand for, and that's really sad to see them do that. Now, Charlotte, I want to talk to you about the corruption in Arkansas, the environment down at the Marble Palace, and the reason is because we're talking here about Senator Brian King, who is he is the one who is always trying to talk about transparency, Medicaid disclosure, and he fights those guys down there. I mean, he fights the status quo, and so do you. And because I remember you down there, talking in Little Rock at one of those conventions, and you said you got to know your price. Can you just please just kind of go over what you meant about if you go down there to serve, you have to know your price?
I've always tried to tell new candidates, you need to think about before you get down there, what is a possible weakness that you have in your life or that your family may have, because they're going to know it. And the first tough vote that comes up, you'll be called down there, and it's a possibility that they'll use those weaknesses to get to your vote. So you need to know before you go down there, am I going to allow that to become public? In other words, maybe I have a son that has a criminal conviction, or I have a husband that wants wants to be advanced at work. What is it about your life that what is the price that you're willing to pay, either to sell a vote or to stand strong on a vote? And if you make those decisions before you get down there, you can stand stronger instead of letting them catch you off guard once you get down there. But you will have to figure out what your price is. In one way or another, it may just be simple leadership or a committee chair, but you will ultimately, pay a price or get rewarded.
Yeah.
It's going to be one or the other.
Yeah, exactly. And what you're saying is you got to calculate that. You got to look at, okay, are they going to try to, if I don't vote the way they want threaten to take a family member's business license away? Are they going to is there going to be an audit now or something like that? You've got to be willing,
That's right.
unfortunately, to put up with that if you're going to stand strong, but you've got to recognize that that's the environment that you're in. And if you're not going to sell out, there's a possibility that they're going to find your weakness and your vulnerability, and they're going to squeeze, just like the mob does, by the way.
Yes. If you're in financial trouble, will it mean, paying your bills at the bank? I mean, we don't know how far they go. If you need a job, are they going to give you a job somewhere? But the reason why I am making this last stand in my district for Senator King is because he does not go down there and give away his vote. He stands strong. And I've seen him in committee. I've voted for his things in committee. And I've watched the other conservatives around me melt and not come to his defense.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a travesty that he can have the good bills that he has had. And, those of us that say that we're conservative and we tell the people back home, we're standing for your liberties. But then when you have the first chance to make a tough stand, you're silent. And that's happened in committee. That happened with Bob Ballinger as the chair of state agencies. He stood silent when he had a chance to help with that transparency bill that Senator King had.
Yeah, and when he came on the program, and I asked him, you said you thought it was a good idea, but you thought it was, you wanted to amend it, but he didn't offer an amendment. And I asked him, I said, does your law firm have any Medicaid clients? As far as Medicaid disclosure, that's what this was all about. And Bob Ballinger said he didn't know. He doesn't know if his law firm, has any Medicaid clients. It's just, come on. This bill has been stopped too many times for us not to be very suspect. Every other business or industry, legislators have to report this. If you have a lawn care company and your legislator and your lawn care company gets a contract with, let's say, a state-funded college, you have to disclose that. You just have to say, hey, they're giving me money to cut their grass. But for some reason, when it comes to health care, we don't have to apply that same standard, and that's very suspect.
It is, and it was very timely that he ran that. And then you look at the problems that we're in now. Senator King seems to be always on the cusp of the next crisis. And as he offers the solution, the legislature is not willing to take his solution, because we can come back to this. They would have to pay a price if his bills were, adopted.
Mm-hmm.
Either they wouldn't be able to get that kickback, or they wouldn't be able to, get that job later. And so they're not willing to pay that price once they get up here. So I just feel like, how do we get that information to the public that a statesman like Senator King is getting blasted in the mail by these false reporting scorecards, and the people that are putting scorecards out have paid a price to somebody.
Yeah. I have one more question. We got to wrap this up, but we're talking with State Representative Charlotte Douglas, and I have noticed something. I have noticed, and this is not 100% of the time, but most of the time, when you have a legislator who has a real job back home and is not dependent financially on the job, on the money they get from being a senator or being a state rep, when they have a job to go back to, a business to tend to, most of the time they're more independent and they have a more conservative voting record. Do you see that trend as well?
I do, and it's partly a function of how much we're paid. How do you come down here for the pay that we get and sacrifice your job at home? because you're going to have to do one or the other. If you are working at home, then you're not going to be down here as much. You may miss them both. So people are critical of us not being here, but being at home and working our job is what gives us the independence to to make those tough votes.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of being dependent upon the salary that we're getting down here, or the lobbyists that are putting money in your pocket, or the promise of a job later. The independence from having work at home and having, to stay at home and work those jobs is almost criticized.
Yeah, they want you to be a part of the machine down there, and it's you're easier to control if you're there all the time. That's certainly true.
And if you're dependent upon that money,
mm-hmm.
yes.
Yeah.
So
well,
I appreciate the education that you do.
Well,
for the public.
I appreciate you, State Representative Charlotte Douglas, and I appreciate your endorsement of Brian King, and I hope people in District 5 are listening, and I know they are, and I think this is going to be a interesting race, but I think what's on the voters' minds are they want to stop corruption, and there's one candidate in that race, Senator King, who is trying actively to stop what's been going on down there. And over time, he's right. Every time, like you said, he's always on the cusp of saying exactly what's going to happen, what the next crisis is, and yet the leadership still is upheld as credible leaders when it's just spiraling out of control. So, State
mm-hmm.
Representative Charlotte Douglas, I appreciate you so much coming on the program.
Help us get the vote out. Thank you.
All righty. Folks, we got to take a break. You're listening to Conduit News Radio. Good morning to you. Back in just a moment.